Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the very first Play-by-Play wrestling podcast, the daily wrestling podcast with me, your host, Aatif Nawaz, and with me is Armaan Kirmani. How's it going, buddy?
Yeah, very good, very good. Excited. This is going to be the start of a very, very intriguing, brand new, fantastic wrestling podcast, originating from the UK. So, yeah, let's go for it.
I love
man.
it. Wait to sell it, man. Wait to sell
That's
it. That's
the way.
beautiful.
That's the way.
beautiful. Well, there's been so much happening in wrestling of late, and we always have so much to talk about. Right now, I guess everybody is excited. It's only a few weeks away. The Royal Rumble 2015. It's the big pay-per-view. It's one of my favorites. I'm sure it's one of your favorites. Who's going to win it?
Well, let me stop you there, man. One of the things is, Royal Rumble was by far my most favourite pay-per-view, but I just feel like over the last few years, it's kind of lost a little bit of its charm.
You didn't like Batista winning?
No, wow, that was a bit forced upon us, really, and I just feel like it doesn't have that kind of, feel about it. That it was one of the bigger events, and in fact, I probably think it's still the second biggest pay per view of the year
in terms of gross, yeah.
And I just feel it was losing a little bit of its charm, and. This year, as you said, who are the contenders? Well, probably you've got Roman Reigns there.
Well, he's the favourite.
And then you've got Daniel Bryan, who should be the new favourite now that he's entered himself.
And he's the backup plan, isn't he?
Well, I don't know. I think Roman Reigns might have gone down, man. I mean, his promo work hasn't been so good over the last couple of weeks.
Nor is his ring work.
And actually, I'm not so sure about him anymore as I was maybe a few weeks ago. So...
Well, they made a big thing about Roman Reigns. Like, if you noticed on the new credits at the start of Raw, they made new credits for 2015. He's the last image you see.
Yeah,
and that's always
absolutely.
quite, that's quite an important thing in wrestling. The last image you see on the title credits, Roman Reigns with his fist out doing the, believe thing.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not convinced about him. I wasn't convinced about him before his injury. I'm even less convinced about him after his injury. Look, I wish him luck. I think he's got a lot of potential, but I think it's too early to give him that big push. Going into Mania, main eventing with Brock. I don't want to see that, to be honest.
So, do you want to see Punk? Sorry, I beg, not Punk. Punk's not around anymore. Bryan. Do you want to see Bryan and Lesnar?
I would rather see Bryan and Rollins.
Really?
Well, I just think that's a better matchup. I don't really want to see big Lesnar, small Daniel Bryan overcoming the odds. I mean, we've seen that, time and time
but
again.
in theory, isn't Bryan the perfect foil for someone like Lesnar? I mean, Lesnar so far he's demonstrated a lot of power, but Bryan's got kind of the grappling credibility, the actual wrestling.
I honestly just don't see the believability in Daniel Bryan beating Brock Lesnar, and therefore I know it's like when Rey Mysterio wins the title. I feel the same thing.
Small guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's fine. I think we can give him a genuinely good wrestling victory as opposed to this big sort of mythology, overcoming the odds and
David
giant
versus
kind of thing.
Goliath.
Yeah,
thing.
I'm kind of sick of seeing that, and I just don't think Daniel Bryan needs that. I think. It's my personal opinion. He's a great wrestler. We should focus on his wrestling and these gimmicks and storylines and stuff. It's just I'm not happy about that.
What do you think then? Do you think?
Well, Brock might retain as well. I mean, we're kind of assuming that the title's changing hands. I mean, it looks like the writing's on the wall.
Well,
but
because the thing is with Brock Lesnar, his contract is nearly up, and there's
Yeah,
rumblings
but-
about the UFC.
yeah,
We'll talk about the UFC in a bit.
But
by the way,
he might be just using the UFC as leverage, as a lot of people are considering. If he renews, I mean, where is he going to get the schedule he's got? He's world champion. He never has to turn up, and he's getting paid millions. He's not going to get that UFC. And I think when you don't really get punched in the face, I think you'd rather stay at WWE.
I don't know, man. Brock Lesnar's the kind of guy who could take a punch to the face. But okay, so if not Bryan, if not Roman Reigns, who's going to win? Who are the other contenders? Well, there's Seth Rollins, I guess. Maybe not, because he's now in a triple threat match for the world title.
Well, I don't think he's going to be in the Rumble match.
So who else is a contender? Dean Ambrose? Do you pull the trigger on Dean Ambrose?
Actually, on Raw, he got a clean loss
against Bray Wyatt.
Bray Wyatt, so
who's also a contender. You have to say now.
He must be a contender, but I just think Dean Ambrose his push is finished. I mean, a clean loss to Bray Wyatt without any outside interference or anything. He got Sister Abigail twice, and he was put in. I just think it's all over for him.
I think the way they're booking Dean Ambrose is interesting because they think he's Teflon. He can take a bunch of clean losses on television and it won't hurt him too much. I think there's some truth to that.
But I think it has hurt him because I'm already as a viewer thinking that he's got no chance now. And why would you give him a clean loss against a heel on Raw? I mean, pay-per-view maybe. With a big build-up. This wasn't even a build-up. It's a 1 week build-up, a Raw kind of thing. First of the year. I'm not happy about all these pay-per-view matches being shown on Raw. This is another sub little thing. I've got to make this point. I know I'm sort of rambling on a bit, but I need to have this rant. Why are there so many pay-per-view matches? I have absolutely no idea why there are so many pay-per-view matches
on free
Raw.
TV.
Yeah, I'm not happy about this.
And my biggest gripe with the whole wrestling thing at the moment, especially WWE, is the stop-start booking. So they'll start and they'll make you believe in someone like a Dean Ambrose. He was by far the breakout star, especially when Reigns was injured, and all of a sudden he's now, as you say, clean jobbing. And I'm sure they could just give him another push going into the Rumble. He could be the guy that comes out, does something interesting, and there's no way of knowing which way they're going to go. The smart money's on Reigns winning those.
Yeah, but do you know what would be interesting? Roman Reigns draws number 1. Whoever draws number 2 comes in and eliminates Reigns straight away. That would actually set the...
Never happen.
Of course it won't happen. Of course it won't happen. But that's exactly what's going to actually set the cats amongst the pigeons. That's what's going to get me hooked. I don't want to see Reigns coming in, eliminating 29 other superstars and being this powerhouse going into Mania, clean sweeping Brock. I just don't want to see that. He's not good enough. He hasn't earned the right to do that, and that's what the build-up seems to suggest at the moment.
Who's your pick then? Your final pick? Who's your predict is going to win?
Daniel Bryan.
Daniel Bryan. I'm going to go along with that actually myself. I think Daniel Bryan's the best bet. I think Reigns has come up short. They really desperately wanted him to connect, but he hasn't done. And Daniel Bryan has that insane connection with the fans. He pulls really good TV ratings as well. So there's no reason why they wouldn't get behind him. I guess his age might be a factor. He's a bit older than Reigns. He's got a lot more miles on him.
Although what it does mean is that if he wins the Rumble, Daniel Bryan that is, he's main eventing again at WrestleMania, which is, well, I'm sure he's as over as anybody.
Yeah, he's a draw.
We saw him doing it last year, so
he's a draw with the hardcore fans. You got WrestleMania is all about the hardcore.
Well, so you think it'll be Bryan and Brock at WrestleMania?
This is the thing. Let's talk about that. Assuming, and we both agree, Bryan is our prediction or our pick to win the Rumble. Lesnar. Now let's talk about Lesnar. There's rumors now that he's not going to make it to WrestleMania. People are saying Royal Rumble might be his last night. You're right. He might just be leveraging his position. Like maybe he doesn't have any intention of.
If there's one thing I know about Brock, he loves a good payday. I can't see him missing out on Mania.
Really? What's left for him to do? To do a clean job at WrestleMania and give up the title? Why would he bother?
I'm not so sure about that. He doesn't have to do a clean loss necessarily, but I think if there's anyone who owes something back to the company after being champion and never having to defend his title, I think it's time that Brock does the favors. But he may be staying on as well. I mean, that would be even more epic. I mean, one of the great things I think that the WWE title needs is continuity, and we haven't had that since Punk's reign, and Punk's reign was not even main eventing most of the time.
Yeah, but we need to see the title more as well. I mean, we've seen the title 3 times in the last couple of months.
A lot of people say this is a good point. I'm not convinced we do. I think the less we see it, the more of a special attraction it is, the more appealing it almost becomes, especially in this day and age.
You sound like Vince on Steve Austin's podcast.
It's not that. I just feel sometimes the titles are overexposed. I mean, if we go back to Hogan's era, I remember when I was growing up watching, I mean, we used to have weekly superstars and challenge, but Hogan wasn't on those shows all the time. He might be cutting a promo, or he might be mentioned, but he wasn't. And actually, you still really look forward to that Royal Rumble, or that SummerSlam, or that Survivor Series where Hogan was going to perform. So I'm not convinced that you actually do need the WWE title every single week. And I think you needed it before when they were trying to get the buy rates up for their pay-per-views. But now with the network, actually, as Vince said in his podcast, the title isn't actually the main attraction anymore. You can actually build feuds which aren't based around the title.
I don't know. I mean, that's a very WWE way of looking at it at the moment, I've got to say. And like a place where the titles are a massive attraction is New Japan Pro Wrestling. And we'll talk about Wrestle Kingdom in a minute. But just to finish off this point about the way Lesnar's being booked on the world title. I mean, you talk about Hogan back in the day in the early 90s in WWE. I mean, I'm thinking about Hogan in WCW when he was WCW World Champion, had a limited dates contract. You'd see Hogan on Monday Nitro, but you'd very rarely see him defend the title. And it did become a special thing. This is different though, because in those days, you didn't know you didn't know enough about the business. There wasn't enough smarkiness around. Now everybody kind of knows what's happening behind the scenes. And you've got to remember, WCW in the late 90s had one of the biggest and best talent rosters in the world.
If I don't see Brock every single week, but I just see him at the big pay-per-views, not even the monthly ones, but if I see him at SummerSlam, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, I'll be satisfied. As long as there's a storyline build up and he makes occasional appearances just to build a storyline, I won't be complaining. I think the quality of the storylines and the matchups needs to increase. I don't think we need more visibility. We've got enough visibility. I mean, the Intercontinental title is becoming a joke. You know, it keeps changing. It changed again on Raw. Well, I mean, to a match up that wasn't even built up, we had bad news. I've got some bad news for you. Yeah, the bad news is you bloody won the title again. Do you know what I mean?
Bad news Barrett was always going to get a push, but it's the wrong way to treat Dolph Ziggler. They've kind of fed the Intercontinental title to the story. Let's talk a little bit about different promotions. So we're talking about titles being devalued and not being visible very often. One company that knows how to take care of the titles and build up their significance is New Japan Pro Wrestling. We just saw Wrestle Kingdom 9, which I'm going to say was one of the greatest wrestling shows I've ever seen. The best back-to-back main events I've ever seen. One for the Intercontinental, one for the IWGP Heavyweight title. Did you see Wrestle Kingdom 9?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole show was really good. I mean, one of the strange things was having English commentary over these Japanese stories and wrestlers.
Jim Ross and Matt Striker.
But I guess it brought in a new audience, like myself,
Yeah.
so it was really good. I actually think Matt Striker did really well. I was actually slightly disappointed with Jim Ross. I felt like he wasn't up to his usual standards of research, and in fact, it was a bit the dynamic between them was a bit strange. They were both kind of doing play-by-play, one over the other. There wasn't really a colour commentator.
I noticed that Matt Striker actually, he'd obviously done his homework and he knew all these finishing moves and all the storylines.
Yeah.
He knew all about New Japan.
I was really impressed by him. I mean, I remember him from his time at like SmackDown commentator, and he did a bit of Raw and stuff. And I think he did really well for such a big event like that.
He was doing a lot of he was doing a lot of ass kissing with Jim Ross as well.
Well, I think he has to. I mean, at the end of the day, Jim Ross is a Hall of Famer, and deservedly so.
Yeah.
I think Jim Ross adds credibility in the show. I'm just saying, I have high expectations from Jim Ross.
Some of those moments were so cheesy, though. Where he said something. He was talking about Tanahashi taking a picture with Jim Ross for his Twitter. He's like, that was just as sweet. That was a great moment for me personally to see you two.
Yeah, but I think there's a wider point that he was making, and I think which was that it's actually quite rare to see that connection between these Japanese wrestling icons and American Hall of Famers, and I think we're getting the exposure. I mean, I noticed that Jim Ross often made references back to the WWE. I mean, at one point he was saying that was quite Randy Orton-esque. I mean, I really don't see any comparison between Randy Orton and some of these wrestlers. I mean, Randy Orton has his own style and persona, and is a great wrestler, but I think comparing him to the sort of as an icon to the Japanese wrestlers was doing discredit to some of the amazing talent that we saw.
I guess so. There was a lot of references from JR about American wrestling. I think a lot of the idea was to try and bridge the gap for people who'd never seen these guys before. Just to give them an idea of what these like. And he made references to Austin Rock, their rivalry, to talk about the rivalry between Okada and Tanahashi. And he's absolutely correct. They have a hell of a rivalry. They fought numerous times before.
Okada, what an absolute amazing drop kick!
I know, right? I've never seen an arena go nuts for a drop kick like that before.
He hangs in there, man. He's like a basketball player, just hanging in there, and it is actually such a beautiful drop kick.
The crowd popped. That crowd pop was on par with anything I've seen in nature for a drop kick. And hey, what about Tanahashi? I mean, he was just incredible. In the ring, he really got the fans behind him. And I thought the air guitar thing was a little bit cheesy, but everybody's really they love it.
Well, maybe I lost something in the cultural sort of translation of the whole air guitar gimmick, so I didn't really read too much into that. But one thing that I thought was really good was that the title didn't change hands, and this brings me back to the point about the titles. Just think it's really important for the credibility that titles only change when challenges are really, one, deserving, and two, there's been a real big build-up to it. Now, admittedly, I don't really know the build-up to this, but the fact that the title didn't change hands really made me feel like, the World Championship really means a hell of a lot to this promotion, and I was really impressed overall. I thought, and also the 4-hour show, I mean, considering they were just back-to-back matches, there were no promos.
They had those little videos.
They had the videos, but they weren't sort of like,
it's not the same as WWE.
There were no, break matches like drop down, like we have the Divas match in WWE and stuff, which I know plays a part in the graph for an event, but just goes to show you don't always need that. They had the Intercontinental followed straight by the
they went straight for the old school scheduling, isn't it?
And by the way, the Intercontinental match, those wrestlers were fantastic as well.
Shinsuke Nakamura and Kota Ibushi, they were just I mean, Shinsuke Nakamura, he's like the perennial Intercontinental champion. He was formerly the IWGP Heavyweight champion. And to go to your point about long reigns, I mean, they have exceptionally long reigns with the world title. You very rarely get these like 2-3 week reigns when it comes to the heavyweight or the Intercontinental Championship in New Japan. I think Tanahashi held it for 404 days or something. Okada held it for 305 days. So we're talking about year-long reigns, year-plus reigns. with the world title. Tanahashi's in his 7th reign, which is like a world record, and you feel it. He's not a young guy either. Tanahashi's 38 years old.
Yeah, but I mean, he definitely performs like he's 50 years younger.
Absolutely. He's a beast, and you can tell why he's the man in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and it's an enormous privilege really when there's so many great stars. Loads of American stars on show as well. So a really kind of podgy looking Jeff Jarrett, AJ Styles. Using that finish was very scary for me. The Styles clash, which has nearly killed a few people last year.
I feel like they're just using that more as a gimmick now. I mean, I'm sure it has legitimately injured people, and injuries happen. So there's no discounting.
They even mentioned it on the commentary.
Yeah, I know, but I feel like it's like when Owen Hart wore "I just broke your neck" kind of T-shirt and use that as a sort of gimmick. I mean, I find it a little bit bad taste. I think if it's happened, it's happened. We don't need to use it to get cheap pops and get the wrestlers. AJ Styles is one of the best wrestlers, and he's main evented in New Japan before, and he's clearly one of the best, and will be up there again.
He's he's the only TNA wrestler. When he was contracted to TNA, he was the only wrestler in the history of the PWI 500 to be #1 from TNA. AJ Styles.
I mean, I'm a big fan of his work. I've always thought that he's extremely talented.
Do you think there'd ever be a place for him in WWE, AJ Styles?
He'll probably get into the Hall of Fame one day if you just on the back of his finisher being so lethal. No, I don't know.
They don't recognize TNA in WWE.
Yeah, they don't. But I think at some point, he depending on the longevity and how long he goes on for, I think there'll be enough demand for him. And the Hall of Fame lacks credibility when it doesn't have all the best wrestlers in there.
Well,
so
we're talking about Macho Man going in hopefully this year now. AJ Styles, I mean, he's been running roughshod all over Japan. In fact, his first match in New Japan, he won the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, which tells you how much they rate him.
Absolutely.
And I think the next event for New Japan Pro Wrestling, the listings are about to be released. The match listings. It is going to be AJ Styles against Hiroshi Tanahashi.
I was just going to say, I think it's a good coup for Jeff Jarrett's new promotion as well. I mean,
Global Force Wrestling.
The fact that they piggybacked off of New Japan's pay-per-view and actually got their name out there. I mean, they were promoted quite well. And in fact, I think if it wasn't for Jeff Jarrett's promotion, I don't think people like I would have necessarily tuned in, just because the whole English Jim Ross and Matt Striker and the audience has been brought in by the promotions they've done off their podcast.
Oh yeah,
and
without
that as well. So
bringing Jim Ross in was a stroke of genius, because all of a sudden it becomes accessible, right? Because he's that voice,
incredible.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and he's the voice we've been listening to for 20 years, and he's just bringing him in was absolute genius. Because they've tried this before. New Japan did this thing with Ring of Honor in New York, and it did well for Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor have their own TV deal at the moment with Sinclair, but they're not even. They're still there's a race between Ring of Honor and TNA, sure, but WWE is miles ahead. And to come back to WWE Network is finally, well, let's hope, finally coming to the UK on the 19th
last
of
time
January.
they announced it, I mean, it was 10 minutes before launch.
3 minutes before.
And I was one of those people online and just having to read all these forums and stuff. And so don't believe it until you've actually signed up.
Yeah, $9.99 fair price.
£9.99.
Yeah.
So it's actually $15. So I hope we get all the pay-per-views and stuff. I'm not sure how the local UK broadcaster will respond
As it stands,
to it.
all the pay-per-views are included.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they've worked out their partnerships and stuff in time. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it will be a real big success here in the UK. I think there's a lot of UK fans that are, very nostalgic when it comes to their wrestling, very well informed. So I just think it's about time.
I want to see some of these features. They look really intriguing as well. I mean, they do these little profiles on the wrestlers going into big events. So they did the Shield. They did a little documentary about the Shield. They did one about Daniel Bryan as well. His road to WrestleMania. That's something everybody wants to. I mean, there's going to be some great programming.
Well, I just feel like the test for the network comes down to how regularly they can have good content, new content that's exclusive to it in not the first 6 months, but in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, because I think people will get bored of the library eventually, and actually you can access the library in all sorts of online sort of
half of it's
websites.
On YouTube Daily Mode. I mean, there's so many websites where you can find all these events. Okay, but I mean, but it's been like they've bet the farm on it a little bit. The WWE Network. the WWE bet the farm on it.
But actually, you get Rumble for $9.99 now,
which is cheaper than what, 15 quid it used to be on Sky Box Office.
Yeah.
So it's value is undoubtable for fans, but it's crucial that they hit the million mark. Now we won't know, I guess, until after WrestleMania when they release the figures of how many buys the network has. The last reported numbers are still 667, so roughly 600,000 and change, right? And they need 1 million to break even. Do you think they need the UK to get there?
Oh, I'm not going to bet against Vince. I think he'll hit whatever numbers he needs to hit. It all comes down to how much promotion they put behind it, and again the quality of their sort of main events and stuff. But one thing I did want to mention is Punk and his move to UFC.
Yeah.
UFC as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Do you think it's a gimmick? Do you think it's he's got a chance out there?
No, I mean, I think they're being realistic about it. He's not rushed into any fights. Punk obviously was unhappy in the WWE, and for the most part, most people that know about it have wished him well. They've been quite diplomatic about it. And I singled out Ryback on the podcast, but Ryback I thought dealt with it all quite well. And he did a recent podcast with Jericho as well, and I think he came across quite sympathetic. So if you've not heard that,
I think this whole thing has been a big PR disaster for Punk. I mean, I think he had some legitimate concerns that he didn't address in a very, I don't know, politically correct way, but that's not his style, so I didn't expect that from him at the same time.
He's not.
I just feel like, Vince's podcast afterwards, Ryback's podcast, just the reaction. I think he's just damaging his own legacy, and I he's frustrated, he's angry, he's bitter, and we get that, and we appreciate that. But he's always angry, he's always bitter, and I think sometimes he needs to drop that gimmick, be Phil Brooks, and just be like, look, it was a part of my life, it was great, I've moved on. But
you gotta be careful. He doesn't like it when people call him Phil Brooks.
Yeah, absolutely, Landsberg, absolutely.
Yeah.
but again, Landsberg, that's another example. I mean, Landsberg,
he does that to everybody. Landsberg is just he's a kid just poking at you with a stick.
But Punk should have known that when he went in. He did know that, and he didn't rise above it. And
it was disrespectful with a coffee cup, though, has to be said. It's a TV show,
right? Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, you might remember that and Punk made the right point in his defense that they did put the whole montage video up at the front making fun of his UFC sort of chances as well. So I think I'm just sad as a wrestling fan to see CM Punk's legacy being tarnished in any way. And when he's contributing to himself, I think contributing to the damage to his own brand image himself, that disappoints me even further. I mean, I personally don't believe he was the best in the world, and I think he's buying into his gimmick too much, almost a bit like Bret Hart sometimes.
No, I mean, he was for a long time. He was probably at least in the top 2 or 3 performers in the middle of the ring.
Yeah,
he performed amazing matches, incredibly popular.
Absolutely, but it's at a time when wrestling really hasn't been blessed with a lot of depth in its locker room.
Yeah, you just have to watch Monday Night Raw last week to know that.
Well, there you go. I mean, so you've got to put things into context. I mean, CM Punk is ratings galore. I think he is an amazing performer. He's interesting. Everybody loves to watch him, and we wouldn't have seen that Landsberg episode if it wasn't for Punk. I mean, you probably watch it years after.
Well, it's generated. I mean, in that respect, it's probably a really smart move by Dana White, because that coup with for UFC to bring Punk in, it's brought so much attention onto the product. All of a sudden, Punk's been doing the media rounds. He's been promoting the UFC 182 show. I think that was the most recent one. And all of a sudden, you see him everywhere. He's talking. It's weird because Punk, even when he was with WWE, even when he was world champion, didn't do as much press as you'd expect, because, I mean, let's face it, I'm sure he's a really nice guy and everything, and he's very moral and ethic. He just rubs people the wrong way. He's just got that abrasive style. He doesn't have the John Cena friendliness to him, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is important for somebody who represents a company.
It reminds me a little bit of when Michaels had his reign. I mean, just at the time when he won the championship, as talented as he was
96?
As a performer. Yep. He just wasn't, I guess, mature enough, I suppose, is the way to take the pressure that comes with being the champion of the company. And I feel Punk needs to get out of the sort of, I need to prove myself stage and actually be a leader. And I feel like he's really lax as a leading personality. But I wish him all the luck. I want him to do well. I actually think he will be back in the WWE eventually. I hope that he's back. And if Brett can come back the way I look at
Anybody
it.
Can
Anyone
come
back. Hogan can come back.
Warrior.
Anyone can come back. Warrior can come back. So I'm sure Punk will be back. So I hope lots of people make lots of money out of this.
Are you gonna buy it for UFC when he makes his debut?
I'm not so excited about it just yet. I don't actually know who his opponent is.
Nobody does yet.
So I guess that will sort of add to it. But
We're talking about the Green Power Ranger. He's a candidate at the moment to fight him.
Hopefully they won't refer to him as the Power Ranger.
No.
But I think he has some
Jason
sort
David
of,
Frank. No, he's an actual martial artist. It's not just a joke.
But Punk's done some what is it?
He's been training Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but he's never had a professional fight. He's not even got the best belt, or so he's not. His training isn't on par with anybody in UFC, which has left a lot of people bitter because there's people that are grinding, kind of like the development system in WWE.
Well, I guess as a wrestling fan, if he gets absolutely battered in his fight, I mean, it probably won't happen because they'll find somebody of an equivalent.
We'll protect him a little bit.
And protect him, of course, as he's a star. But can you imagine the destruction it would have on the legacy of wrestling superstars if he just gets absolutely battered?
We've always got Brock Lesnar, after all, who became the best heavyweight fighter in the world. I don't think anybody's going to doubt the credibility of wrestlers.
I think if Punk gets absolutely smashed in his fight, I don't think Lesnar will be in the WWE very long.
People are expecting Punk to get smashed in his first fight. I think I think he might surprise people. He's a really dedicated, driven guy. He's been told his whole life he's never going to make it. He was never supposed to get into WWE. Only Paul Heyman got behind him. He got into the first tier. He won himself an Intercontinental belt. Became world champion. Became WWE champion at a time when nobody thought he could do it. So I don't doubt Punk's ability to overcome the odds. I think he's been quite smart about the way he's choosing his training camp. It's definitely a watch this space moment, and we're going to be following Punk's career as well. I mean, I certainly am. I'm going to be watching his UFC fights, keeping everybody up to date. At the moment, as it stands, no opponent's been announced, but they're saying towards the end of the year, we're going to get Punk's UFC debut. So stay tuned for that. Well, we had a really good chat here. Before we kind of finish it all off, we're going to do a regular feature on the podcast, which is going to be Match of the Day. This is a daily wrestling podcast. So every day we're going to do a Match of the Day. We're going to alternate. Today, Armaan, you're going to give us your Match of the Day. What's the match in question?
1991 Royal Rumble opening match, The Rockers versus the Orient Express. It's the most amazing tag match. The most amazing tag match I've seen in a long while, just because the tag team division has recently been so non-credible.
Oh yeah.
Although picking up a bit recently.
Better than Stardust and Goldust.
But anyways, if you've got the network, you should check it out on the network. Even if you don't, I'm sure there's other ways you can find it. Also, I just like the old Royal Rumble, because we're in Royal Rumble season.
Yeah.
I've been watching some of the old Royal Rumble clips and matches and pay-per-views, and the whole logo, the theme. And in those days, opening a pay-per-view with a tag match and having that high energy, and Orient Express were also a really good tag team. That I think.
Who was in the Orient Express?
Well, don't ask me to pronounce Japanese names. One of the things I struggle with.
No, I don't know. I have no idea. But I know Rockers, obviously, Shawn Michaels, Mighty Jannetty. So we're going back in the day, 91.
So but I think the psychology in that match, the work standard in that match, the storytelling in that match is so good. And it's good to see, obviously we know what Shawn Michaels grew into, but to see him in his early sort of stages in his WWE career, I think he was only about a couple of years in at that time, having made his debut, I think 89 he came in. So that's my Match of the Day. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Tweet us, Facebook us,
I'll tell you the whole shebang. I mean, we'll tell you how to get in touch with us as well. We'll be reading out your emails and your tweets and whatever else it is, any other way you want to contact us. But there's also a quiz as well. We're going to give you a question every day. So every day on this podcast, it is a daily wrestling podcast after all. We're going to give you a question from back in the day.
That's the Dean Douglas Award.
It's the Dean Douglas Award.
Who's going to be?
It is Dean of the Day. Who's going to be Dean of the Day?
I think let's put it out to our listeners, and if we can find the Dean of the Day, and we'll announce it in our next sort of show, and I think that's the way
winner.
to do it. Keep it as interactive as we can.
Hey man, absolutely. You just get in touch. I mean, this is a wrestling podcast, so if you've got a view on wrestling, you share it with us as well. It's just as valid as ours, if not more so, probably. So anyway, the question is now, Kurt Angle, the wrestling machine, whilst in his tenure in TNA, there was a time when he had several belts, right? He was holding several belts. All the TNA belts, and one other belt, one other championship. Name that championship. So I'll repeat that for you. In his run in TNA, Kurt Angle held all the championships, the X Division Championship, the Heavyweight Championship, the Tag Team Championships, but he had one other championship as well. Name that championship.
I think that's an excellent question. I'll be surprised if anyone knows the answer to that. And
no.
Oh, well, I'm sure someone.
I'm sure. Oh, you're going to give our listeners some credit. Well, guys and girls, thank you so much to listening. We're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to get this podcast up every day at midnight, so you can get it straight away.
That's UK time. UK time.
Midnight UK time, GMT. Indeed. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook under PlayByPlay. You can find us on Twitter at PlayByPlay123, or you can email us at playbyplaywrestling@gmail.com. That's playbyplaywrestling@gmail.com. Well, that's all we've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. From myself, Aatif, from Armaan.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.